Welcome to Stories from the Stage, produced by Word Channel and GBH Boston in partnership with Tell and Act. I am Patricia Alvarado Núñez.
And I'm Liz Cheng. We're the co-creators of Stories from the Stage. In every episode, multicultural people stand in front of a live audience to tell a personal story based on a theme. Well, today, it's American Journey.
Two women whose family came to this country for the opportunities. They are among our most enduring stories.
And Patricia, our first storyteller, as you know, is Shifra Burke. She was born and raised in Lowell, Massachusetts.
My parents were originally from Poland. They came to the U.S. after the Holocaust. They were both Holocaust survivors whose entire families, all but 3 cousins on each side, everyone else was killed.
Like many children of immigrants in her generation, much like me, she didn't ask her parents about what they'd been through.
I could have actually asked the questions had I realized that I could have asked the questions.
Shifra just wanted to be like everyone else, an American girl. But as she grew older, she began to have questions about the past and about the meaning of her name. Here's her journey.
I'm 16 years old. I'm at City Hall with my younger sister, Roz. And I'm there for my birth certificate so that I can get my driver's permit, and I am psyched. I'm pretty excited about the idea of driving. So I tell the woman behind the counter, Susan Burke, B-I-R-K-E, and before I can even tell her my birth date, she says, "Oh, honey, I know your family, and that's not your name." And I think, I'm 16. I've lived with this for a long time. I think I know it's my name. She said, "It has a Z in it." And I think, oh, well, maybe they spelled Susan with a Z because my parents are Holocaust survivors. English was their 4th language, and they spelled, may we say, creatively. So she hands me back a piece of paper, a little white piece of paper, and she's right. It has a Z on it. It says S-Z-I-F-R-A, R. Burke, B-I-R-K-E. We are the only B-I-R-K-Es in Lowell, and it's June 28th, 1950. This must be me. But this is a me I have never seen before. Walking back to my parents' clothing store, my sister and I are like, Sifra, Zifra, Cyphra, Zyphra, unintelligible. Until my sister breaks out in hysterical laughter and says, "Oh my God, Sue, they named you Shifra." I'm 16, I'm a cheerleader. I just want to be normal. I just want to be Susan Burke. It wasn't a great name, no frills, no fuss, but it worked just fine. Now, I find out that I am going to be Shifra. Shifra is my Hebrew name. When you're a Jew, you get a Hebrew name. You don't do anything with your Hebrew name. You just have it. We get back to my parents' store. I show them this piece of paper. I am melting down near tears. They ignore me. They start this volley back and forth, or as my dad would say, forth and back. So, Sala, was is this rar? I thought we named her Shifra Leah. Yeah, I thought we did too. I think I figured it out. I think we named her Ruchel. Ruchel. What does that sound like? Vomit, right? Ruchel. 25 minutes ago, I'm Susan Burke. No middle initial, no nothing. I'm just Susan Burke. Now, 25 minutes later, I am 16 years old and Lowell, Massachusetts, and I'm Shifra Ruchel Burke. That night, I'm like, so where did the Susan come from then, all these years? Well, a customer. We was calling you Shifra. A customer told us it's not a good name in America. We say, what should we call her? They tell us a good American name is Susan. So we called you Susan. I guess we forgot. Between that moment and going to BU, to college, I'm back and forth, or forth and back, about, do I go as Schiffer? Do I go as Susan? Do I go as, what do I do here? And I decide to take the plunge and go to BU as Schiffer. I tell people my name is Schiffer when they ask, and they call me Schiffer because I just told them that was my name. On the home front, my 8-year-old brother is deciding to be a big ally, and he tells people, my friends, when they call, we don't have a Sue or Susan who lives in our home, but we do have a Shifra if you would like to speak with her. I'm 30, living in Indiana, a couple of sons. People ask me about my name. I tell them the truth. Shifra was an Egyptian nursemaid. I tell them the half-truth. She was an Egyptian nursemaid, but I don't tell them the Jewish part of the story. I'm 50 years old with my mom sitting at her table, and my very stoic mom is staring at me very intently with tears in her eyes. My mother doesn't have tears in her eyes very often. I ask, like, so is everything okay? Yeah, Shiv, everything's okay. It doesn't look like everything's okay. Well, I'm just thinking, looking at you, you look just like my mother. Well, I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, because my mother's mother, Shifra, and her father, and her brothers, and her sister, and the rest of the family were exterminated in the Holocaust, like my dad's family. So I decide to ask her, is this hard? And she says, well, yeah, it's hard, but it's a good hard, because I loved my mother. I loved her so much. And when I look at you, I see my mother, and I get to see her close and be close to her. I'm so glad we named you Shifra. And I'm so glad you named me Shifra, too. It's been 51 years since that moment when I would have done anything to be the cheerleader Susan Burke. Today, when people ask me about my name, which you can imagine happens regularly as Z-I-F-R-A, Shifra, I tell them the whole story. I tell them that Shifra was one of the 2 very brave Egyptian nursemaids who refused to obey the Pharaoh's orders to kill the Jewish boys, the Jewish boy infants. That Shifra was my grandmother's name, and she was killed in the Holocaust. I tell them all sorts of things about my name, including the Jewish part of the story. I was too nervous at 30 to tell the Jewish part of the story and to talk about my name. Today, I couldn't be more proud, more honored to be able to share my name and to share this story for all the Shifras and all the Ruchels and all of the Lasers and Chaims and all of the people who couldn't tell their own story because they didn't survive to tell it. Thank you.
Shifra Burke is a business consultant based in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. In a moment, we continue our theme of American Journey with the story of a beaten-up green station wagon and what it means to travel the country in search of belonging.
You are listening to Stories from the Stage. Our next storyteller is Grace Talusan.
I am an immigrant from the Philippines. I came here when I was 3 years old.
Like so many immigrants, Grace and her family never thought they would be staying in the U.S.
My father was the first to arrive in the United States. His plan was to come here and further his medical education and then go back to the Philippines so that he could set himself up well. So he knew he would be gone for a few years, so he sent for my mother, my older sister, and I. We always planned to go back to the Philippines, so my mother started collecting gifts to bring back home. She collected bed sheets and towels and even toilet paper because she thought it was just so much softer here than it was back home. But as happens sometimes, you go someplace and that place changes you. So my father started to dream and he started to wonder, what would it be like to stay here? What would our lives look like? What would the lives of his children be like? And so he took a risk and he took the exam for foreign medical graduates and he passed. And all of a sudden, this whole new world and future opened up for him and our family. He opened his own medical practice, hired a staff, bought a house in the suburbs, and bought his first new car, which was a Chevy Caprice Classic station wagon, turtle green, interior and exterior. And his idea is that cars are meant to be pragmatic. They should get you from A to B safely. And so one of the first things we did with that car is we drove to visit his brother and sister in Toronto. The family is really important in the Philippines, and we didn't have family in Boston, so that was one of the first things we did. So we all piled into the station wagon, we drove to the Canadian border, and the Border Patrol took one look at our station wagon, which was piled up with suitcases, and our passports, which were just about to expire, and he sent us back. And I didn't know at that time, but soon after that, our status became, we became undocumented. Our status became, we had overstayed our visas. And my parents hired a lawyer to regulate our papers, but the lawyer didn't help and took their money, but it took maybe 15 more years until we were able to fix our status. But I didn't care. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was a kid. I was an American, as all my friends were. I rode in that station wagon to school, to my activities, to band practice, to soccer, and I had no clue that this was all going on. The only difference was that we didn't leave the country. So if there was ever a school vacation, we didn't find us in the Swiss Alps skiing or in Cancun swimming in the winter. We took road trips in that green station wagon. We drove to Florida, we drove to the Midwest, we went all over the South, and we saw how America was made. We looked at the monuments and the battlefields, we went to the White House, we saw what America wanted to remember, what they wanted to memorialize, and we visited all those places in that car. Now, my parents didn't want to spend money on fast food, so my mother would bring a rice cooker along on our trips and chicken adobo, and we would have that at the rest stops, and I would look really jealously at the other families who were unwrapping peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and potato chips, and I just thought that was so exotic. They also didn't like to stop very often, and one time I saw them switch drivers without ever stopping the car on the highway. My father kept his foot on the gas, and he kind of inched his way over to the passenger side, and my mother held on really tightly to the steering wheel and looked straight ahead until she was able to inch the rest of her body over and then put her foot on the gas. And we all cheered when they did that. It was great. So we visited monuments and battlefields, but my father's favorite thing was to go on a factory tour. First of all, it was usually free admission, and secondly, you would walk away with a parting gift. So we went to the Kellogg's factory, and it smelled so good. The air smelled like corn syrup, and there were these big hot vats of cereal, and I just wanted to put my arm in and take some and eat it, but it was boiling hot, so good thing I didn't do it. We went to the Chevy assembly plant, which was full of metal and really boring. And we went to the US Mint, which we watched money get made, and we dreamed of what we could do with all that money. The one place I remember is the cigarette factory in Richmond, Virginia, and we watched all this messy brown tobacco get packed neatly into white cylinders and then get packed into boxes. And that day, every single one of my family members walked away with a free parting gift. I got my first carton of cigarettes at age 9. So we finally got our documentation regulated, and my father, this is about 15 years in, and my father was still driving that green station wagon. And my mother felt kind of embarrassed because he was a doctor by now, and he would park in the doctor's parking lot at the hospital amidst all the Audis and Mercedes and BMWs, and he had this ramshackle green station wagon in there. So eventually, he decided it was time to let it go. He thought it had tremendous value. It brought a lot of value to my family. And so he parked it in the front lawn, put a cardboard sign up, and put a price on there. But every week, his heart would be broken. No one wanted it. So every week, he crossed out that number, put a lower number on. Week after week, this happened until eventually he had to pay somebody $200 to come and tow it away. So that green station wagon did more than just bring us all over the United States and bring us to school and work. It was the place where we became American. We learned what it was to become American, and we became that in that car. And it brought us safely from new immigrant to citizen, from alien to belonging, from A to B. Thank you.
Grace DeLusen. She teaches creative writing at Brandeis University and is the author of a memoir called The Body Papers, winner of the Restless Book Prize for New Immigrant Writing.
Well, Patricia, Grace's story is a bit like my own. My mom became a citizen after my oldest brother was born. I never knew until recently, when I discovered his paperwork, that my dad didn't become a citizen until much, much later. And until his dying day, he always thought he would return to China to live out his life.
Liz, as many immigrants, I always thought I was going to return to Panama. But now, the U.S. is home for me. I think that once I got married and got a job that I love and bought a house, I think buying the house was a big thing for me. That's when I realized you're going to stay. Yeah.
That's definitely true of a lot of people. If you have the time, check out Kenneth Eng's film, My Life in China. After swimming from the mainland and establishing a life in the U.S., Ken's father does return to China with unexpected results. I wish my father had seen this film. From Stories from the Stage, I'm Liz Chang.
And I am Patricia Alvarado Núñez. In our next episode, we will have stories about romantic encounters, one across religious and racial lines, and another that requires a flight halfway around the world.
Listen and watch more of our unique stories at worldchannel.org. Share them with people you care about.